Hello internet, and today's video is going to be another book opinion, those videos in which I tell you my opinion on the book. And fair warning, this is probably going to be more of an emotional spiel than anything else. If you've read down below on what book you just clicked to hear my opinion on, and you've watched any of my other videos, you know what's coming. So the book we're talking about today is We Are the Ants by Shaun David Hutchinson. And this has become my top book of 2017, unless I read anything else in like the next month and a half that changed my mind. Because this book for me was just such an emotional relief, in which I felt so deeply connected to, in which I resonated with the character, and which just taught me that I wasn't alone, that showed me that all my thoughts of being alone, of knowing that I wasn't, but never finding anyone who thought the similar to me, just, it was comforting, right? It's always comforting to find those books in which you can really resonate with, which you can emotionally attach yourself to, and which can remind you that you're not alone in the world, no matter how lonely you feel at times. So this book is about a teenage boy, and he has been kidnapped by aliens for the last 3 years. I think he's 16 now, so by the time he was 13, for the past 3 years, he's been abducted by aliens, and they've done experiments on him and all sorts of stuff. And one day they give him this option, and they show him the world blowing up, and they tell him, you have like 244 days, you have the chance to press this button and you'll save the world. And throughout this book, he's dealing with this question: do I push this button to save the world, or do I let the world die and be destroyed, because the world's not that great of a place and it would probably be better for everyone if I didn't save it. So we understand going through this guy has a lot of depression around a whole bunch of things. And what I love best about it is that his depression was so similar to mine and the one that I've experienced. The only way I can explain this is existential depression, where you think too deeply about the world, about your place in the world, about whether or not it's worth it, but in a sense of which you have to overanalyze everything, right? And to a sense where you're sarcastic and sassy and ill-humored and dry-humored and dark-humored about everything, while thinking about what the point is of the world. I'm not sure how depression works for everyone. Like I said, I don't think depression matches for everyone, but that's personally how I feel, and that's how I saw his feeling, where he just wanted to analyze the world, and he didn't even understand he had depression for the longest time, or he couldn't convince himself, he couldn't admit to himself that's what he was feeling. And I felt the same way, because when I first experienced these thoughts, I've always have, really, right, ever since I was a kid, I never thought that I was depressed or sad necessarily. I just knew that thoughts like that made me scared, that they terrified me, to think of how small I was in the world, how I didn't mean much of anything, that I couldn't combat those thoughts, that I couldn't put that together without it scaring me, of me trying to figure out whether or not the world was a good place, or whether or not it was worth saving in any sense, or whether or not, if I was given a choice, if I would save the world, right? Thoughts like that scared me, and I didn't understand that those thoughts could lead to depression, or those were thoughts that were connected to depression, right? So watching this, I could definitely see and emulate myself in him, because I felt like he was the same, where he couldn't fully admit to himself that he had a mental disability. Like, he couldn't admit that he had mental problems. He was just like, I'm just a person trying to live my life, and these are just thoughts that go on in my head. And slowly he starts to realize that not everyone thinks this way, and sometimes, even if everyone does, that's not the healthiest way to think. So I love how this book goes through. I love how it hits like topics. It talks about suicide and how that can affect you. It talks about being homosexual and how that affects you, in both when you're out and you're okay with whatever the world will say, and when you're not okay with whatever the world will say and you want to hide it. It talks about like familial issues and having to do with siblings and parents, not just from him, but other people he sees. It talks about how when other people's actions and when they do something, how that affects you in some sort of way. And I love how when he goes through this, he asks all these different people in his life, what would you do if they presented you with this choice? What would you do if you had a chance to press a button and save the world? Would you do it? And how everyone's answer is slightly different as to the reasons why. And he's like, should I press the button because the world deserves another chance, it deserves saving, or should I not because it would just be better off for everyone. It would be a world without pain if there wasn't a world at all. And I love how the book ends where it's just like, at the end of the day, like, you don't get a resolution, right? You don't get the answer of what he does. It's just a conversation of this guy trying to figure out what he's doing. Like, what are the answers to the universe? What is going on in his mind? How can he combat it? How can he gain control again of his mind and of his thoughts, and just be a happier person when need be, that he's not always bogged down by all these thoughts, and him understanding people better, but also understanding that when people hurt you, it's not okay. And just because you're used to it doesn't make it okay because it's normal for you, right? It's not okay that people do these things. And just because, like, it's a norm, it's just not okay. I'm like saying the same thing, but like I want to stress it. Like, and I understand it. And like so many times he would be like, oh, this person did that again, whatever. And I would be like, they messed you over. But I would be like, yeah, like people have done that to me before. And I'm okay with it. I'm like, oh, all right. Well, you've done it before. So why is it any different now? And I just move on with my life. And just how dangerous that can be when you get used to bad behavior by others and you don't stick up for yourself. Even though when you know it's wrong, you just get so used to people treating you like crap that you never say anything about it because it's normal for you, right? So I loved those things, and I loved at the end of the day the overall message of it, that we are the ants, right? I mean, we are the ants. Whew. The last line of this book, the title of this book, I actually have it tattooed across my ribs. That's how serious this book touched me, how I emulated perfectly for me, because when I came out of my depression that, like I said, is similar to his, I came out with the thought that it's okay, right? Like I said, as a child, I thought of these things. And I don't know if that's normal or not. I don't know if most children at the age of 5 start crying in their beds because they don't think they're worth anything, because the universe is too large and they are so small and they're but a speck in the entirety of everything, right? I don't know if that's a normal thing that kids do. Like, I've never had a talk about it and say, oh, does everybody have this thought at 5? I don't know. But I know that as I grew older and after I stopped ignoring those thoughts and just hiding away and pretending I didn't think them because they scared me, and I actually confronted them and I dealt with them and I analyzed it like this kid did in the book, and I just thought over it. I like wallowed in it. I thought, I analyzed, I observed, I tried to figure out why this was the way it was. I came out of it at the end a person who could accept the bad in the world and could say, we are the ants at the end of the day. We are just specks in the universe. We are not the greatest things, that we may never change the world. We might not be the kings of the universe, but that's okay, because ants are pretty awesome when you think about it. You can be an ant. You don't have to change the world. You don't have to make this huge difference. It's okay to be a speck in the reality of time, because at the end of the day, in that time period in which you live, you're still somebody. You're still worth something. You're still important. Even in the future, you might not be remembered. In the time period in which you live, in the life in which you live right now, you may be an ant in the grand scheme, but an ant can still accomplish things. And when I read this book and it came to around the same conclusion, which I had come to, the same conclusion that gets me through the days, that reminds me that it's okay to think thoughts in which I don't know if I'm fulfilling my greatest potential, that it's okay to just be me. Like, it's fine. I don't have to strive to be the hero of the day. I don't have to be the chosen one to be an awesome person, right? Like, that's not necessary, because as small and as insignificant as ants are in our world, in the way that we see things as human beings, they still serve a purpose. they still march on. They still continue with their lives. They still have some goal. And we may not remember every ant, but they're still important. And like I said, I don't know how to convey my thoughts and feelings on this book fully, because there were just so many things in it that I loved that just connected to me. I think anyone could enjoy this book. I think anyone could love this book. I know many people, I've heard that many people like this book, and every time I hear someone else say I like that book, it just like, I'm happy, right? Like, you get happy when people love the books you love, right? You love it. You love it. And every time I hear like that someone just has this checked out, or like someone mentions it as like a 5-star book for them, I'm just like, thank you. Thank you for seeing that as an amazing book. I feel like an idiot because I'm crying in my room by myself. But the point is that I can't tell you, read this book because it's a great book, because it is to me. And I think anyone could read this, even if you didn't have an emotional connection to it, and really enjoy it, right? And really love it. But it's just such a book close to my heart that I recommend it to you because it's a piece of me, right? It's a piece of who I think I am, and who I've seen myself to be, and that I connect to so much. So I recommend this book to any and all who love stories that have some emotional impact, that takes a kid and takes his observations of the world and fully examines them and fully analyzes his own mind and the way he thinks of the world and the reasons why he thinks the way he does, and his frustrations in coming to terms with just his own mind and living in his own head. And if you like those stories, then read this book. If you've gone through any of the things that I've mentioned and you think that you're just interested, read this book, because I think it's a really great book. So I don't have any questions. I usually do, but I don't have any questions for you guys. But if you like what you're seeing here and you want to continue to see more, click all those buttons down below, and goodbye, Internet.